Donald Rowell for an interview. What is your full name?
Donald L. Rowell.
When and where were you born?
In Glens Falls, 11/29/25.
What was your pre-war education?
I don't know that we had any pre-war knowledge other than that when the United States went into the war, Pearl Harbor in 41.
So like,
we decided. Well, I just before I could go into the service, I volunteered, and my mother made me save $50, and I was only making about $15 a month, and I had to give her. I had to give her the $15 for 3 months before she would sign the papers to let me go in.
So you graduated from high school?
No. I went in before I graduated. I finished the 11th grade at Glens Falls High School. And then I never returned to go back into class, get back into school after I got out of the service. I went in August, around August the 15th of 43, and I came out the middle of March in 46. So roughly 2.5 years, 2 years and 7 months, something like that. And then my wife and I had decided, I had proposed to her one time when I was not home on leave, and she accepted, and we got married in September of 46. So I was roughly only home about 6 months before we were married, and then I had to go to work.
Could you describe living during the Depression before the war at all?
I can remember we lived right next to the railroad tracks, which is the bicycle path today, and I can remember going and picking up coal for the wood stove, for the stoves to keep the heat in the house. And we did burn other coal, but there was quite a bit of coal thrown off the trains. The train made quite a few trips from Cooper Street up to Lake George, and we would pick up the coal, and we survived.
Before America's involvement in World War II, what were your feelings about the war?
We heard about the Nazis, what they were doing, and it was something that we thought of, but we didn't know that we were going to be there, and not until after Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm. And how did you hear about Pearl Harbor?
I was hunting on Ridge Street at the time with my oldest brother, and we had a radio in the car, and we heard it on the radio as we were coming back from hunting and rabbit hunting, and we thought it was quite devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And that was December 7th of 41. My brother enlisted in the Marines in first part of 42, and then I had another brother that was in the Army, and he was in the National Guard, or the State Guard at the time, and then he enlisted in the Army, and we lost him over in Anzio Beachhead in 44, and that's the pearls of war.
Yeah. So you entered the service in 43. You enlisted. You weren't drafted.
Right. We took our basic training at Sampson, which was the naval training station. There was also another big one in Great Lakes, but Sampson, which is in the Finger Lakes, was a big naval base, and we took our basic training there, which was about 8 weeks of it, I guess.
So, what branch of the service were you part of?
The Navy.
Okay. Was there any specific reason why you chose the Navy?
Well, I had a brother in the Army, another brother in the Marines, and I said, well, I think I'll try the Navy.
So during basic training, what experiences or how did you feel about the just basic training in general?
It was tough. It was very rigorous, and we didn't do a lot of shooting. I think the only shooting we did was with a .22 rifle, and at one of the rifle ranges. And of course, after we went aboard ship, then we didn't use the rifle anymore. We had 8-inch guns on the ship, and it was a new ship. The original Quincy got sunk about a year, probably in the middle part of 42 or 43. Well, the first part of 43, 42 to first part of 43, and then they named the ship that I was on. Took the same name that the one that got sunk.
So, what was your specific training on the ship?
We learned to handle the 5-inch guns. Our main battery was 8-inch guns, and then with a lot of the practice that we were doing, we had to pass the ammunition for the 5-inch guns. We had to pass the ammunition for the 8-inch guns when we would fire those. But they used the 5-inch guns for anti-aircraft as well as some bombardment, and then the 8-inch guns strictly for the bombardments.
So you were passing ammunition on D-Day?
Yes.
At Omaha Beach?
Yes.
Could you describe your experience?
It was, we could hear of course we did a lot of firing with our guns. The ship was constantly under motion going into the beachhead. We were just going in just as slow as the ship would travel until we got into and firing all the way in, and then turn around and take right back off out to get away from the beachhead, and then start right back in again. And I think we were probably around 3 days of almost steady bombardment, and it was touch and go. But we had no casualties. We had shrapnel holes in the sides of the ship, but actual casualties we had none. We were very fortunate.
How did you feel about the situation at Omaha Beach?
It had to be done. It had to be done, you know, in order for the Army to take over afterwards.
Before D-Day, you were in England?
Yes.
I'm assuming?
We went over to overseas. We did a shakedown cruise down around Trinidad. Like I said, this was a new ship. and to make sure that everything was operating the way it should be operating. Make sure all the guns were fired, make sure the all the valves and everything else. It was just such a big ship. The ship was about 670 feet long, which is equivalent to better than three football fields. And we had a population of almost 1,700 men and officers on the ship, and everybody had to work, had to know their job, and had to perform it well in order for the ship to survive. And this is what we did.
What was it like in England at the time?
In Glens Falls?
No.
Oh.
In England.
Oh, England. You know, I got a liberty in England, and I met another fellow from Glens Falls walking, and I think this was just before D-Day. I was walking in the street, and this guy banged into each other on the corner, and I believe his name was Decker. I think it was Bill Decker. So long ago, you know, it's kind of hard to remember. And just by accident, we just run into each other, and we talked quite a bit, and then and I had wrote a letter home to my parents, and of course they X'd a lot of writing out, so what I had told them in the letter, and they finally figured it out who it was that I did run into. But they didn't want they didn't want the enemy to know that where we were and what we were doing, and it was interesting. It was interesting. And of course, D-Day, we had to go across the channel.
You were also in Tokyo Bay for the surrender of the Japanese.
Yes. Yes. Well, what we did after we bombarded in Normandy, then we had to go down into southern France in Marseille for another landing down there, and I've forgotten how long we were there, but we did bombard again in Marseille for the other landing, and of course this was France. And after we got done, and after we came back to the States, then they outfitted our ship with ramps and elevators, and we took President Roosevelt over on his Yalta conference, and this was over in the Mediterranean, where he met with Winston Churchill and Stalin, and I can remember that he took his daughter, Ann Vettiger was her name, and she went along he was in a wheelchair, and he was really handicapped, and he got progressively worse. And anyhow, we had him on that, where he went to see Stalin and Churchill. And then we met up with some other Haile Selassie and some other dignitaries in the Suez Canal. And then we turned around and we came back to the States, and reloaded up with our ammunition and all our supplies, and headed back out to the Pacific after that. And so we were in Tokyo Bay for the signing of the peace.
By MacArthur?
Yes.
What were your feelings about the Japanese surrender?
It was good. It was glad. We lost so many men, and that brought an end to it. And we were real glad. We were real glad that it was over.
How did you feel at the time about the atomic bombs being dropped?
We thought, all of us, we talked about it, and we felt that was the proper thing to do at that time. Maybe today would be different, but at that time it saved a lot of lives, and of course a lot of destruction for the Japanese. and we're friendly with the Japanese people today, thank the Lord.
Mm.
We one of our boys, one of our granddaughters had a Japanese from Japan over in the last year. It's a Sega City, I guess that's what you call it. Does that sound familiar to you? Okay, it was I'm quite sure it was Sega City that and if that was the city that they came from, or if that was the name of the project that they did. And another one of our grandsons is supposed to be going over again this year, or this summer, to go back over to Japan for the same program. And hope he makes out as well as we did while we were there, and as well as our granddaughter did while she was there. And it's an interesting theory to get the people oriented with both cultures. And I can't say enough about what they are doing along that line.
Would you happen to remember Ernie Pyle?
Yes. Not personally, but I remember.
Yeah.
He was in the Army, wasn't he? He was a correspondent. Yeah.
He was a journalist?
Yes.
Do you remember anything that he wrote?
No. No. But I know I can remember reading a lot that he had written.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember what
Nothing
it was.
Specific, yeah.
No.
So how did you feel about his death?
It was tragic, and but I guess it happened to a lot of them.
Yeah. Would you happen to remember Bill Malden?
No.
He was a cartoonist.
Is he the one that wrote
about two infantrymen? Usually he wrote about Willie and Joe.
Yeah.
They were, it was said that it was him and Ernie Pyle were up there with the troops.
Uh-huh. I don't remember that they were, but they probably were. Mm-hmm. And I can remember reading on the cartoons all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awful important thing, the cartoons in the paper today. And that's one of the first things that I look at when usually it takes me about 2 hours to read the paper, to read everything that I want to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy the cartoons because so much of it's just happened to, maybe it happened to our family yesterday, but it's so much of it is, it happens in our everyday life.
Mm-hmm. What was your greatest experience during the war?
To see it end and come home safe.
Mm-hmm.
I told you that I lost a brother over in Anzio, and I had another younger brother. He was in for about a year, just about the end of the war. Matter of fact, I got together with him. He was on a destroyer, and I was on his heavy cruiser. And his destroyer pulled into Tokyo Bay while we were there. And he got to come over to the ship that I was on, and we had quite a talk.
Could you discuss the food during the war?
Actually, we had a lot of powdered and canned stuff, and in the Navy, the ship was big enough, so we had a lot of supplies. We would get fresh foods aboard ship, maybe once every month or two, and then we really ate like kings. I put on weight, and I think just about everybody else did. But I think this is because of the size of the ship that we were on.
Mm-hmm.
That we ate better than a lot of the people on the smaller ships, and a lot better than the infantry did. And,
Yeah.
It was good.
After the war, did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
I did for a couple of years. Oh no, a couple of months more or less. But I was working at a nursery here in Glens Falls, and I got paid extra through the GI Bill. And then I lost my job there, and I went to Native Textiles, and I worked there for about 45 or 48 years. So that was most of my work after the war.
When you did use it, how did it help you out?
We were able to buy tools that we needed in the job, and that helped with the education of learning what the florist business was about.
After the war, when you first arrived home, what did you do?
I probably, if I can remember right, I probably loafed around for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, and then there was a guy that wanted me to paint, and I helped him paint houses for a very short time. And I used to work for Lindy's Nursery and greenhouses before I went into the service.
Mm-hmm.
And I was they had Palm Sunday probably in '46. And I was over there, and I'd run into Lindy again, and he wanted to know when I was coming back to work. And so I went back to work for him, and I worked for about a year, someplace around a year. And then the business was getting kind of slow, and I got laid off, and then I went to Native Textiles, and that's where the rest of my career was.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
No. At one time I belonged to the VFW, and I wasn't a very good member. I didn't participate an awful lot in it, so I dropped out.
Have you attended any reunions?
Yes. Twice. We went to New York one time, and then another time I went to Massachusetts, and I met up with one of the other boys that I was in the service with. And we had a reunion at Quincy, Mass. And that's the only two that I have been back to.
How do you feel about the Germans today?
I worked with, matter of fact, he just died in the last week or two. Hans, I can't think of his name. He was.
I think I know who you're talking about.
He was.
Lived in Queensbury?
Yes. He was a drummer, and he had his own band. He was a prisoner of war, and he was over here into the States, and I don't remember where, but then he, Wolfhart, his name is, and then he went back over to Germany because, they sent him home. Mm-hmm. But he applied to come back over here, and he was married at the time, and they came back over here with his wife, and they had kids, and I don't know if they had kids while he was in Germany or not, but his 2 or 3 kids he had, and they came back over with him, and so he spent the rest of his years here. And they were doing, a lot of those guys were there because they were made to go there. And we went in because we had something to do. And I guess that was the difference. And I had no animosity toward the Germans, no more than I had against the Japanese. it was interesting times. But no, I had no animosity against either the Japanese or the Germans.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
I can't think of anything other than well, I guess you see the picture of the ship that I had here. This is one. And this calendar here, I just received this. And this is all the cruisers. I forgot now where it was. Well, there's a destroyer. USS Albany, USS Macon. Ticonderoga. I know the Quincy was there, and I forgot where it was. Oklahoma. Newport News. Just to let you. Oh, there it is. There it is. Can you get it? CA 39, I believe it was, or 30. Yeah, 31. I'm sorry, it was a CA 71.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful old ship. And after we left it, and then they put it in the mothballs, and it was in mothballs, and I believe until the Korean War, and then they took it back out, and it was in the Korean War for the duration of that, and then it came back to the San Francisco, and they dismantled it, and they just threw everything into the brink, or whatever you want to call it. They, it was just no more, and it was a shame too. We all thought it was our ship, and we were sorry to hear it go.
Yeah.
And I've talked with this Gus DeSoni, who lives in Massachusetts, a number of times, and we usually get together at Christmas time. And when I had to go to Boston for that operation, he come over to see me, and we had a good talk. And I stayed at his house. One other time we were on vacation, and we came back through Massachusetts, and I looked him up, and he made sure we were going to eat like kings. And we had a good feast there. And another time that he was here in this area, and he made sure he stopped to see us. And then when the reunion, I think it was 2 years ago that I went out to Massachusetts, and I stayed at his house, and we were supposed to get together with our grandsons to go. There's a battleship Rowell in Massachusetts, someplace, and all the battleships, and we were going to go out, and it wasn't too far from his house. We were going to go out and take a look at them and just admire them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe next year.
How did your military experience influence your life?
After I got out of the service, I went back to what I was doing, and I worked at a nursery in the greenhouses before I went in. And when I got out, I worked for a very short time, and then I went into textile, and I worked in textiles, like I said, for about 46, 7, 8 years, something like that. And I just retired. And Oh, 96. The fall was 96. And the main reason I retired, I guess, because I had gotten sick and I had a big operation. So I didn't get back into anything that I was into before the war, other than for the very short time that I worked at the nursery.
So everything after the war just was pretty much different for you?
Yes, yes. Well, we had gotten married. We had our first child when, after we'd been married. Got married in September, and our daughter was born a year from the following December. Well, she was born in December of 47, so a little over a year later. And then we had 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls, and they're all still living in the area. And so many people have left this area to move out of the state, move out of the country. And I have one brother who lives on Morgan Avenue, and I believe he's got 2 of his kids still in the area, and the rest of them moved away. My oldest brother lives in Pennsylvania. He retired after 26 or 7 years from the Marines, and he stayed out in Pennsylvania. We get to see him maybe once a year. And his kids don't live. Well, he's got one daughter that lives there, and he's got 2 kids living in Washington, the state of Washington. He's got another boy that lives in Phoenix, Arizona. So a lot of, I feel blessed that my family is still here in the Glens Falls area. Either Glens Falls or Queensbury.
Yeah. Would you do it all over again if you could?
Probably. Probably would. Maybe I'd try to get a better education before I went in, but I had no regrets for going in. We saw a lot of them, a lot of different countries. We saw Ireland, we saw Scotland, we saw South America, we saw the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean is so beautiful. It's just blue, blue, blue water. And we got to see dignitaries, some of the bigger dignitaries, and a lot of people didn't get to do and get to go as much as we did, as much as our ship did. Our ship was the one that took us out these places. We got over to Pearl Harbor, and I was friends with another boy, and we had a Liberty at Waikiki Beach, and I can still remember that. And we had a Liberty on a Magmag Island. It's just an island out in the middle of the Pacific, but yeah, I would do it again. I wouldn't hesitate.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I can't think of anything. And I wish you could read the Odyssey of the Quincy. And would you get a chance to read it if you did?
Yeah, maybe when this project is done.
Yeah.
If you'd let me, I would.
Well, I would love to, yeah. I'm going to put my name in it. So you probably got it in there. And it's such an interesting, maybe I'll put it right here in the front. Geez, I think I would like to. Someday maybe I'll remember that, what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I had let my boy, one of my boys, borrow that one time, and he thought it was, I don't know how much he got to read, but he thought it was so interesting. And it probably tells in there about these other dignitaries that we didn't get to meet them personally, but they were aboard the ship, or they were maybe on a ship right next to where we were, and it was good. It's a good book. It's a good book. Handle it with care.
I will. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.